So we're going to talk a little bit about warping today. And I can share my screen here so we can see what I'm talking about. I'm going to put you guys over here. So it's an amazing technology, honestly, warping, like what you can do to your sounds. Um, I've got like a drum loop here that I can play for you real quick. This is just like the overheads of a drum loop anyway. Well, it's not even a loop. I should tell you that this particular drumming that I'm playing you, I purposely speed up and slow down to kind of emphasize what we're doing with warping and how it can be effective. So back to here. Well, I could play them all. Get the whole drum piece here. Let's zoom in on our overheads. You can hear it getting faster. And then it starts slowing down. Um, well, let's see. The way I like to think about warping, and I think it even says this in the manual, it takes your music and turns it into like a rubber band almost. And you can put down warp markers to pin that rubber band at certain points in the musical timeline and then stretch it to another point, put another thumbtack or warp marker down, and you're just pulling audio around really. Um, in this sample here, I've got some drums, and we can see that we've got these little gray marks that happen. Those are called transients, and they just indicate that there's some sort of like musical event happening. The volume has suddenly spiked. So things like drums have very clear transients because suddenly it goes from zero sound to boom, a big hit. Other instruments will swell into volume a little more, and they won't really produce transients quite as much. But rhythmic things like drums really do a nice job showing up here, and live identifies where all of these little transients happen. And if you notice, when I hover over these, I get these pseudo warp markers that are grayed out, and I can just click on them and create a warp marker. And once I do that, I can start pulling things around. I can put another one here and start moving things. And you'll see that this one stays put, just like if it was a rubber band with a tack on it. And then the audio in between gets stretched, and everything after it also gets moved too. I can very easily just double click on that to remove the warp marker. Or even you can right click and then do delete. That would work too. I'm going to just click a couple undos to bring us back to where we were. We can also move these transients if we wanted to as well. We can just hold shift when we have our little warp marker, pseudo warp marker, and then move them this way. And then when we let go, the transient has moved too. And the transients are useful for when you like slice to MIDI. One of the options when you go to slice things up, when you slice to new MIDI tracks, is by transients. So you can have Live create a new drum rack pad for each transient that happens here. I could do that right now just to show you. We'll click that real quick. And we get all of these slices, and each one of our drum hits is on a pad. So it's a nice way to chop things up if you want to. The transients usually works pretty well for drums. Delete that track. We won't need that. So going back to all this stuff. So we said we can double click to add our warp markers. We could highlight a section and right click and then just say insert warp markers, or Command or Control I, and that will put a bunch in there for us. We can, a really good one to know is if you hover here and then hold, on a Mac it would be Command, on a PC I guess it would be Control, you will get 3 pseudo warp markers popping up, one on each side of the warp marker I have. I can double click that, and then it makes a warp marker on either side. And this is useful because I can now drag just this one hit around without affecting anything on either side. So that's really nice for like correcting timing issues. You know, if you've got a drummer like this one that I played, you can fix things up pretty nicely. Any other things I should maybe mention? You can drag them around just by doing that. We talked about that. If I hold shift when I start dragging, I'm actually moving the waveform now. So it's just another way to kind of manipulate things. That's by holding shift and dragging. That will prevent me from moving the warp marker, but it'll move everything underneath. Just like that. When you're in arrangement mode, maybe this is just like a cool thing to know. If you go to your bracket, normally this will extend your audio files. But if you hold shift on a warped sample, you can time stretch it, just like that. So that, I think, is a little bit easier than going inside here and then putting a warp marker down and pulling it around. It's kind of the same thing, but it's a little bit faster to do this way. You can also compress things, and it'll give you like a very glitchy sounding things and change your timing and whatnot. A couple undos here. Let's see. Did I ruin this? I did. All right, I've got the same samples over here actually. Well, okay, yeah, why not? We'll go right into it. So a very common thing like people want to do, like you might want to warp like your one sample maybe and just adjust the timing. But if you ever want to warp more than one sample at a time, like I have a drum kit recording, as long as these clips are the exact same length, which would be the case if you were recording drums, say, or maybe like a couple musicians at the same time, and you wanted to adjust their timing, you can just click them all. And I'm going to actually click down this way. The last one you click is the one that shows up inside the editor here. And then we can go inside, and I can set a warp marker here and a warp marker here, and I will be warping all of those sounds together. And if you notice in my arrangement view up top, you can see everything's moving when I do that. So that's a good way to like fix, say, a drum performance. So if I was going to fix this drum performance, I'd probably put the warp marker here on my first beat. And if I right click, ooh, I can't do that on this multiple warping, can I? No, I can't. Well, let me show you here then on just one. So let's just say I've got my warp marker here. I can right click and I got this option to set 1-1 here. So now what I've done is I've said, hey, this is the first beat, and that changes my timeline. Because before, my recording, it was somewhere in the 10th bar. But if you right click on there, you can tell live, hey, this is really the first beat right here. And now I've got like a reference, and I can start warping this. I'll just stick with this overhead right now to keep it a little more simple. I can start looking here and figuring out like where my beats are supposed to be. So as I listen, I know like my snare drum is hitting on the 2, so I can bring this over here. And I know that this kick, I think that was a kick, is going to be on 3. And my last snare will be on 4. And then this hi-hat should also be over here. And now I've adjusted the timing here. And once I kind of get the first couple down, I can start going by eye a little bit more and like kind of see like I played 1/8 notes, so I can kind of see like every other 1/8 note should be right about there, not that far. And I could go through this whole thing and fix this really sloppy off-time drum performance manually like this. And as I guess I get a feel for it too, I can maybe not even have to be so accurate, like or so what is the word I want? So precise. I can go like by the bar now maybe, and just kind of bring things together. And you can see I did something wrong there. That would probably be this one. Then you can see how they line up now. And if I were to just take this little portion that I warped here, well, let's just do the whole 8 bars. So we're kind of in musical time. Would that be here and here? So I got 8 bars that I warped. I can just highlight this section, and if I loop it, now we're in time. So we fixed this. And this could be a drum beat. This could be any instrument. This could be a whole song. But we've fixed the timing. And, just to remind you of how bad the timing originally was, it's not even going to line up with the metronome. Let's turn that off. It's speeding up. It's going to slow down. But not over here where we fixed it. We made it all nice and clean. Let's see. How are we doing so far? Any questions come up?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, I did have a question and you ran into the same thing. It's that set 1-1 here in multi-sample mode. Um, has been tripping me up for a couple days. Um, so I can see that you didn't find an immediate answer, but that's what I'm wondering right now is how do I set 1-1 in the same spot across multiple samples?
Yeah, that kind of surprised me, to be honest with you.
Yeah, me
Um,
too.
I thought I would be able to just click that. So
Yeah,
the way I'd probably go about it is I would trim this sample.
yeah.
Like I just did, I selected over the course of these 3 tracks. I hit Command E for split, and then I would just delete these guys. That doesn't solve our problem, does it?
It does a little bit. If you set what I've been doing is I'll set 1-1 on. So what I'm doing is I'm syncing up like acapellas with the full track in order to warp the acapella in time with the actual track.
Mm-hmm.
And I use multi-sample mode so that as I go and warp the full track where I can hear the kicks and the snares and set them to where they need to be, then the acapella warps right along with it.
Right.
But yeah, I think what I've been doing is I just select the full track. I find the 1-1. I set it. I trim it to that so
Mm-hmm.
that 1-1 is the clip starts right at where I set the 1-1. I drag it over to 1-1 on my timeline, and then I use like command and drag to line up the acapella to exactly where I can hear that it's just
Yeah.
perfectly synced up, and then I select them both and multi-sample warp them. But it's
Okay.
like a little bit of a process versus if there was a way I could
Yeah.
just multi-select the 1-1.
Yeah, I'm kind of wondering I can do if I can highlight all of these, and if I delete that warp marker, what would happen if I just pull this all the way down to 1-1? And it looks like I'm still doing. I got all 3 clips going. Um, then so now our clips. Would we do this? That should do it, right? And then that would work, I guess. So I just went up here and dragged the beginnings of all of them. So I dragged that first warp marker I put on all 3 all the way to 1-1 instead of just right clicking and saying set 1-1. And then I just dragged the start of our clip over.
Oh, interesting.
And now we're at 1-1.
Huh.
Now we got our very excited drummer.
Cool.
And then from here we could do the warping like we were doing before. If that's what we wanted to do. I can set our warp marker there. That doesn't look right, does it? That would be here, here. There's 2. And we can go through it like we did before and correct this whole set of drums. So maybe that'll be a little bit quicker to go about that way. But it would be kind of nice if that right click worked, but I guess there's some reason why we can't do that. But that wasn't too
Yeah.
bad.
I'm gonna be doing a lot more of these, so I'll let you know if I find anything.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, that'd be
Yeah.
good. I use the warping for this from time to time to fix up some drum stuff uh or anything really that's like audio, cuz what is nice is you can quantize your audio this way. You know, if you right click, you can do quantize. Maybe you can't do them all at once again, but you can select one. I'm gonna go just over here, and then we can select quantize settings, and then eighth notes is really what we want. And we have the percentage too, so we can set it to go right to the grid 100%, or we can be a little more relaxed where it only goes like 70% to the grid. And that will, let's see how it did for the stuff afterwards. So the stuff afterwards was so far off. This beat wasn't played to a click thing. So, but it does correct everything for me within what we actually did, which is pretty nice. These guys would need some work, but we're not working with that right now anyway. Hmm. Let's see. I got a track here, so I thought some people might want to know how to do a whole track too. So I just threw like an old song of mine over here. It's not warped yet. Maybe that's something worth going over. Is in the preferences there are some settings for warping. That might be. Sorry if that's really small on the Zoom screen. I see everyone got close to the computer. Um, the first one is loop warp short samples, and what that is saying, like, what should Live do when you put a short sample in there? And you have some options. You've got, it'll treat it like an unwarped one shot, so that would, Live will sort of like always treat it and not warp it. It can warp it like a one shot, or you can tell it to warp it like a loop. So Live will assume it's some kind of loop that can be warped. I really find auto works great. Live is with, especially with short samples, it's really good at recognizing if it's something with like a rhythm or a beat, and it's also good at noticing if it's just like a one shot hit or if it's just something like, you know, just some sort of sound. So I leave that one at auto, and I'm pretty happy with that. I've really like, I don't think I've ever decided to change it. We've got another one called auto warp long samples. So that will, if you put a longer sample, and I'm not exactly sure what constitutes a long sample, but we're talking like full songs in that ballpark. So Live will automatically do that. I keep that off because a lot of times I'll put field recordings in, or things that aren't songs. My type of workflow really isn't where I'm taking full songs and warping them and trying, like, I guess like if I was DJing, that would be a lot more of my style. So I keep that one off. And you got your default warping mode. I just for some reason earlier decided to switch it to complex, but then I also read that complex is about 10 times as intense on your CPU as beats. So I went back to beats. And there's one other thing that's probably worth mentioning is create fades on clip edges. I've seen people kind of complaining about Ableton Live's audio engine, saying it's like it's not good or something. And the reason that I think they say that is because of this parameter. Because what this does is when you drop a sample inside arrangement view, it creates a very short fade. I think it says like in here about 4 milliseconds, which ordinarily isn't very noticeable. But if you have like a kick drum sample where it, you know, a drum sample, kicks especially, where it hits right in the beginning, you might chop off the initial impact if you have this setting turned on. If I think it's on by default. And it is useful when you are looping things because it does a slight cross fade that helps smooth things out a little. But if you're dropping like a kick sample into arrangement view and you find like it doesn't sound as powerful as it did in my browser or anywhere else, it's probably because this is on and it's cutting off the very beginning of your sample. Um, so that's a good one to think about, and I usually keep it off for that reason. So let me close that down here. So I've got this sample here, and I need to warp it. And all it does is put a warp marker here. And now I can look at it. I'll play it a little bit. It's kind of like a loop almost. What did I solo? Yes, I did. Something else soloed? Yes, I do. So this is the song here. It has this little pickup in the beginning, a little drum beat. So if I was gonna warp this, I'd probably go in here and find that first hit, which is about here, I think. Or here. That's it's probably right here. So, and then I'd right click that, as you said, and do set 1-1 there. And that sounds good. So there's my first beat. We could stretch that out so we hear it. And now I do happen to know this is a fairly steady tempo because I used a beat off an old Yamaha keyboard, like one of those toys you get. I think I released these drums as a pack a long time ago. So it's in there, Yamaha drums somewhere if you search the site. But let's see. And then it sounds like our second hit is somewhere. It might be this one here. Or maybe it's, let's undo that. Maybe it's, you gotta listen a little closer. So I know this is clearly the snare. That's, I think, pretty apparent. And then it looks like this might be our next drum. And what I'm getting here, if you look, it's telling me my sequence BPM is 83. So I would then probably go up here and go 83.7 and see if this starts to line up, which it looks like it might be. So I'll take this warp marker out. That first one was stretching us too much. So from here, I should be able to right click and do warp from here. Sorry, I did that a little faster than I meant to. Right click, warp from here, start at 83.7, and it should be lining up. Looks like things are kind of hitting on bars, right? Well, then we just got to listen to it and make sure. So we kind of got it, right? And what's kind of cool about this is we could then loop this part if we wanted to and chop it up and, you know, whatever you might want to do after you warp something. So it's a pretty short song. It's only like a minute or two. So if I wanted it to be longer, I think it's a 12 bar loop here. So let's see. Maybe I'm wrong. 10 bar loop. So I could take this and go, what would that be, till like about here? So then I can loop it. And now I've got like an endless loop of this song that I can use, which is kind of fun. So if I was maybe say doing a DJ set and I wanted this song, which is only like a minute, but to go longer, I can now just put this in, I guess, like a session view, right? And we got our 10 bars. Yep, 10 bars right here. Yeah, it works out. So now I've got that to do with whatever I need to do, which in this moment is nothing. There's some useful controls here for like we can do like half time, so that'll to turn this into a much shorter loop. We can double time it. Just some fun things you can do with that, I suppose.
The
Then
save, the little save button on the sample box
mhm.
is super useful too.
Yeah, so what this will do, all of your warp settings, they are saved within your project. But if you want to then pull this sample into another project later on, you're going to want to click save, and that saves the information. I think it gets saved within that what do you call those files right now? They're all over your computer under every sample. Um,
ASD.
ASD, thank you.
Yeah.
The analysis files.
Yeah. The ones littered all over your computer.
Yeah, there they are. So that information gets stored in there. I believe is where that gets stored. So I think if you lose that file or delete it, it should probably not remember your warp settings the next time you open it. Something I almost never do, honestly. I just don't really work this way, you know. But if I was, building like some kind of DJ set and I had, say, like a virtual crate of sounds over here in one of my places, I'd probably do that and then just keep them in there so I could just drag them into tracks and then kind of do my performing on the fly.
Yeah, that's kind of how I'm using it right now. Like I said, I'm warping those acapellas so that they're just like perfectly warped, always in time. Then I'll hit that save button and I drag them into a folder called acapellas in my user library.
Right. Okay.
So then I have perfectly warped acapellas that I can drag in to remix with whatever drum loop, whatever samples, whatever sounds I want to mix them with, and they're just I never have to like line them up after I go through the warping once.
Yeah, and that's like the beautiful thing, right? Like you do it
It's
once and then
amazing.
it works with everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, like in like my performance set, I have I have like a track for my drums and like percussion, then bass, and then just different. Uh, I divide it really by like frequency. So first it starts with drums and percussion, and then it goes from bass up to like higher stuff in frequency. But what is cool is like I can take any of my drum beats from any of my songs and put them into any song I want and mix them all together. I can take a drum beat from one song and a bass line from another song and a guitar or synth or something from another one, and they always play in time because they're warped into loops like that. And it makes a really cool way to like transition between tracks and ideas. You're just kind of you don't even have to worry about it. Everything starts in time with your quantization, your global quantization up there, and every time you launch a clip, it's just gonna play in time. Um, did I miss anything? Is there anything else about warping? I have a few notes, but I think I went through them. Um, really, like the other thing I would talk about with warping is misusing warping, abusing it. I guess we didn't really go through the warp modes too much at all, really. Um, those are worth talking about, I guess, and then that leads me into what I would talk about as far as misusing. So maybe if we just listen to this drum beat here, there's a bunch of different warp modes, and they're just different algorithms for how live will time stretch things. Beats mode is good for beats, as you might imagine. Things with transients, things with like very clear rhythms are really good. And I think the way this really works is that, especially if you have it in transients mode, it will look for these transients, every spike in audio. And if you're stretching it out, it will actually loop those. Well, based on this, really, this is the loop mode. Um, if I were to, let's say, really slow down the tempo, which I guess we already did. So we took this beat, which was played much faster, and now we're playing it at 68 BPM. And you can kind of hear like a little sucking motion. That has to do with our beats mode. And the way this is working, in order to stretch it, it's dividing our sample into these little grains, and it's looping them real fast. So it has this effect of pulling them apart without too much noise. And the mode I have right now is it's looping back and forth. So it will go this way, and then it'll come back and forth, like kind of ping-ponging forwards and backwards. And it creates a pretty smooth feeling. We can go where it goes forward and then goes back and goes forward and back. So there's no returning backwards. It's just forward, forward, forward. And that'll sound a little different. Almost like, sounds like an extra drum hit after that snare. And if we go to this one, this will just play it once and stop. And this is going to create like a gated, glitchy effect. You can kind of hear that silence after it. Really emphasize it. So it just plays through it and stops. But I think sometimes this one works okay, especially if you start putting like a reverb on there. Like let's just see what happens if I put some reverb. It might like fill in those silences. A little longer. So if I'm willing to do reverb like that, sometimes I think that actually sounds the most natural, because the first way we had the back and forth has that like sucking. And this way is choppy. But this just plays it and then silence. So the reverb is kind of covering up those silences. And then here, this is really just saying, are we going to have any kind of fading between our sounds? So let me pull out our reverb, go back into our, I don't think it's going to make a difference on this one, really. Oh yeah, it does. So it's like shortening it. So it's like barely anything. And as we open it, we're letting it play 100% of the sample. Or 100% of that sound, I guess, is what it's doing. On this one, we'll get some differences. More choppy a bit. And then here we'll hear it, I'm sure. Yeah, you get a little different flavor. Beats mode is best for beats. It's designed for that. You can go into some of the other modes, like even though we're not doing a tone, we can make a tone though, right? Tone is more like monophonic stuff. We can just hear what that sounds like on our drums. What this is trying to preserve is like, I guess the note that you're hearing. And we can control the grain size, how much. How much is like getting looped, I suppose. That might be something to try on monophonic signals. But I like to misuse these too. Like I think like this, it gets kind of interesting on drums to hear all this choppiness. Texture is meant for more like polyphonic stuff. We got some crazy stutters and glitches with this on our drums. And I should mention all of this gets exaggerated when you start transposing too. The quality of your transpositions will change based on these parameters and what modes you are using. Interesting. Repitch is that's tied in with the tempo here. So it's not really doing anything. If we go to our 111, I guess is what the original supposedly tempo was. The warp markers, as things change, the pitch is changing. So where I sped up and slowed down, now it's staying in time, but the pitch is changing. So the thing that's cool about warping ordinarily is that it will stretch your audio over time or compress it over time without changing the pitch. But when you go to repitch, then it acts more like a traditional way of stretching audio where they do it by slowing down and speeding up the audio, and that changes the pitch. Kind of like on a tape machine. If you slow down the tape, it will play back lower, and if you speed it up, it sounds like the chipmunks singing. That's what repitch does. So as we play with a BPM, we change the pitch. Let's go all the way up. And then the complex modes, Complex Pro and Complex, they're more sophisticated. They're meant to be a little more natural and really good for full songs. But as I think I mentioned, like they do consume a lot more CPU. So if we have we slow this tempo down a lot. That's Complex and Complex Pro. We got some other controls to play with. But I bet, if you notice, I was kind of looking at my CPU in the top right corner. It goes a little bit higher when I switch to Complex and Complex Pro. I saw a 10 in there, where before I was seeing like 6 and 7. It's a little more intense. Something to think about, I guess, if you are running complex sessions. It might be worth, if you're going to need complex, it might be worth resampling it or freezing it so that you can keep the complex mode thing without using the resources of your computer. And I guess like a little bit of what I was sort of getting to there was the fun you can have when you abuse your warp modes. So if I were to take, I'm going to just steal this little bit of a snare drum and put it in. Well, let's just solo this. Okay. I'm going to set it to loop here. We just need this little portion. So the way I love to use warp, probably more than anything, is to just abuse things. Like I could take like this particular snare drum and just stretch it out. Now Beats is sounds pretty good. It preserves things nicely. Might change if we pick some different modes. But, whoops, let's go to tones. Like now we get like some fun stuff happening.
Wow.
Yes. Were you saying something, man? Luke? I saw something. Oh, we
I
lost
just said
Brett.
wow.
Oh yeah. These are crazy, right? Like you just get insanity and just play around with them. That one sounds totally different. Wow. So, now why did this go down here? This Zoom thing's in my way. What we can have some fun with is if we go into our automation modes now, we can play around with like the grain size. And you know what? Let's just draw in some of these curves that Live now gives us. I don't know. You know, this is just totally random, haphazard stuff I'm doing here. We can do that with the transpose too. Again, just have some fun. That's a fun noise, right? So I might very well just like create another track right here, this audio track, and set it to resampling since I've got this soloed. Should be fine. And maybe just like play around with this. We'll do another one here. Oh, see, I messed up. I didn't record. Go back in here. Just each time it comes around, let's try something new. And all the while, I'm recording this craziness into this new track. Let's not even do that. Let's make something really nuts. I keep hitting stop here, but now we've got these things to play with as other crazy sounds. You know, who knows what we can do with these. Put these into like a sampler or even like might even be cool to put this inside like wavetable. I wonder what that would sound like. Just grab that and where's wavetable and just drop you right there. That's kind of loud. You know, like you can just go nuts from here. Wavetable is just such a blast. It makes you just want to play with everything. Put that onto it. You know, I mean, we're off to the races all of a sudden with some noise. Or that could just be like some weird transitional sound you use. Or, you know, what the hell, like, come back here. Why not like rinse and repeat? Take this sound, this crazy noise we had, and let's stretch that out and see what happens there. Reverse it, maybe. and I mean, the possibilities are so crazily endless. You You know, you could just make a collection of these sounds and put them in a little folder, kind of like what Brett was saying with his acapellas, but make a little sample folder of just insanity noises that you can use later on in other projects. Really, I guess the possibilities are, limited by your imagination. But that's how I really like warp mode, is just playing around with these parameters and seeing what happens, how we can destroy sounds and pull them apart. And I think maybe before we like jumped on the live stream part of this, we were kind of saying about recording sounds. Luke, I think you said like the storm you wanted to get right. Um,
Yeah.
once you start time stretching things, even if like it's too windy and the wind is blowing in the microphone and it sounds weird, start time stretching it and put it in a sampler or a wavetable, and who knows what you're gonna get. You just it's a very fun way to just explore and see what's possible in the world of your sounds, because it's almost like you unlock all this stuff inside a sound when you start pulling it apart, stretching it like that.
Sorry. But yeah, no, I mean, like, I already
That's
kind of
okay.
like was messing around with a few of the time stretching stuff, the warping and everything. Like, pretty fun.
Yeah.
Pretty fun. I took like one of those like I forget what it was. What's it called? It's off the villain res off of that Ableton loop pack. I took that and I stretched it out and like looped it and everything. It sounds pretty cool. And
Nice.
especially using that like what is it, the warp 75 BPM, you just saved my life like a lot. I needed that.
In which one?
The warp from 750 or from
Oh, okay.
75 BPM. Sorry, from my like BPM point.
Yeah. You tell it like what to do. Those are like
Yeah.
some auto warping settings.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can use those to you can tell, okay, we're going to start at this beat, or just it's straight from here, or as like a certain length loop. It'll kind of give you suggestions. And that can be a way to just sort of speed up the process, so you don't have to go in there and click every single one. Like that track that I had here, like I knew that drum beat was programmed, or at least it was it was just a loop that came with the keyboard, but I knew it was like on time. It wasn't something I played that might be loose. When you start trying to warp things, like especially like older recordings that aren't played to metronomes, then you got to do a little more work and get in there manually and do it.
Yeah.
So I think with those cases, though, it's a good idea to sort of just look for like maybe like the ones, like of every bar, the first beat of every, uh, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, just the ones, those downbeats, because if you start warping every single hit, sometimes you pull out the performance. And a lot of what makes some of those really cool old recordings have so much vibe is that they are loose and it's not perfectly quantized and tight. So if you go maybe with just like the downbeats of each measure, you still preserve the stuff in between, and you
Yeah.
keep a lot of the feel. Because I think that's a big reason why people like to sample and why they like to bring in like break beats and stuff like that. It's because it has the vibe, it has the feeling.
Yeah. No, it's definitely gonna help with because like I was saying in the chat, like I'm like trying to like flip from vinyls and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
and like that will immensely help because like I can just like set up a few basic like markers and just like you know go from there. Pretty useful. I like that.
Yeah, it's great for doing stuff like that with vinyls, and just, okay, we got this. Here's the downbeat. Here it is, and then put it in. Do whatever you want with it, and start chopping, reversing, flipping, pitching.
Yeah, I do a lot of that with, but I put everything on the like drum pad so you can get like the more like MPC kind of feel, and you can get kind of off the grid even with like your finger drumming of the samples and stuff like that. It'll
Yeah.
give you kind of a groove on top of the
Yeah.
chop stuff. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And like probably for that too, you don't want to over quantize your performance of it.
Yeah.
That looseness. So it's good to do if you are going to quantize, like to use the percentages. Can be pretty helpful. Nice. Now you see, I feel like it'd be fun to just spend some time. For me, I get excited about the destruction of sound.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that might be something I spend some time doing soon. Just
I mean, that's what the loop kind of made me do, was just like destroy sounds. I was just
Mhm.
like for hours just like taking their like the little like effect instrument like racks they made, and I was just like trying to see how messed up I could make the sound.
yeah. Yeah, and like record that, resample it like we did here, and now it's like a whole fresh new piece of audio that you can then mangle even further. Because there are like some limits to how far you can warp something. Like it'll, well, if I get rid of this, there is a point where I can no longer stretch it, and there it is. Like that's as far as it'll let me stretch. I guess it's just the limits of the algorithm. But where is this even coming from? 4. So am I looking at this here? Um, I could then resample this to another track, and now I could just stretch it further and just keep recording it and keep stretching it. Because once it's recorded, now it's like a fresh thing to stretch and play with until you could pull like a drum hit into like 20 minutes if you do it enough times. If you're into that, though, there is a cool app called Paul Stretch. Um, it's called like Paul's Extreme Stretch, I think actually. Um, I'll see if I can put like a link, and there might be a VST of this now. You know what? I'm gonna put this in YouTube too. I kind of forget we have the YouTube chat also, but let me put it in our Zoom chat too. Um, but this is you can turn a song into like a 300-year audio file with this app. And there is a video somewhere where someone took, I think, Justin Bieber baby, baby baby, that song, and stretched it into this like really beautiful ambient piece. Like it's it's like ridiculously long. It doesn't sound anything like it, but it's a really cool app. You could stretch things into insane lengths.
Yeah, have you ever played with a like VCV rack at all? VC.
No, I haven't, because I'm afraid of modular.
Yeah.
Because I'm afraid if I do, I'm gonna
Start
suddenly have a new
vibing.
obsession.
I mean, it's fun. This is like the easiest thing I think to like. They have like samplers in there, and then you can basically just have that be like your trigger for your audio, and then yeah, you can start running it
Yeah,
through all these crazy modules and like emulating it, and just doing super weird stuff to the
right.
sound. Yeah, but
I think it's free right now, right? To try.
oh
It's
yeah, yeah,
turn
VCV rack's free, yeah, and
VCV rack.
and there's I've never bought I mean a module. And I think you could probably spend your life going through the free ones and playing with them and figuring it out.
Yeah,
Like
you can.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But yeah, I guess they're gonna come out with another version they're talking about that might be paid and has some different stuff. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty fun though.
I just downloaded a modular thingy for free. It was off of, like Cherry. It might be VCP, right? But it was off of, like Cherry something, Cherry Pie maybe.
I'm not,
Because like I've been
Not sure.
wanting to get into modular recently, just to mess around with it. But like
yeah,
I don't want to buy no. It's an expensive hobby.
yeah.
It is. Well, I've got the Behringer Neutron, which has like a semi-modular and the Korg MS-20 too, and I can see where this leads.
Oh, yeah.
So I have enough stuff that I need to learn and figure out as it is that I've not given enough attention to. So
Yep.
I've learned, unfortunately, that like it's never that next piece of gear that's gonna be. You always think like, well, once I get that, then I'm gonna make it. Then my hits will come. It's just doesn't work that way. Well, let's see. We got a little activity in these comments here. I don't know about Pro Tools as a way. I don't know how time stretching even works in Pro Tools anymore. I used Pro Tools in version 6 or 7, I think, and I don't know. I don't think it even had time stretching back then. If it did, I didn't know how to do it. I couldn't really speak to that. But
This this modular thing I got, it's called voltage module
voltage module.
I don't know if I've
by
heard of that.
Terry Audio.
Oh no.
It looks pretty cool. I mean, like, I don't know. I really don't know what modular really fully is. That I know like what it is. I just don't know. I haven't like hopped in it yet.
When I was in Portland, I went. One of the cool things about Portland is there's like a little tiny shop for every niche of interest in the world. Like there's a modular synthesizer store. In fact, I think there's 2 or 3 modular synthesizer stores. And my friend and I went in there and we hung out for a while. And you know, for one, I was just like, how does this place stay open? Like, how do you keep a place like this going? But you know, everyone in there was really cool, and they had this huge wall of modular stuff. And I was looking, I was like, I don't even know how to make this thing do anything. Like, this is, you know, and I've gotten into synthesis and learned a lot. But when I look at that, I'm just like, you know, I wouldn't even know where to start. It's just lots of knobs and lots of plugs, lots of wires, and I'm just not ready for that, I don't think.
Thanks, guys. I gotta run real quick, but yeah, I appreciate
Cool.
it, man. It was awesome putting
Yeah.
faces and talking to
Yeah,
everybody. It's
exactly.
cool, man.
Yeah, we've been in the
Yeah.
Discord hanging out, but this is cool to do. Yeah, I hope that was helpful and
No,
gave
that
you
was
something to
awesome,
think
man.
about and play with.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I'm gonna get myself going too. It's time for a late dinner.
Yeah,
So
I
Yeah.
feel
maybe
that.
we'll wrap it up. Thank you guys for coming. This is gonna be
Yeah.
a thing now for the Music Production Club. We'll do these meetings. I am in talks with someone that wants to do like a kind of presentation for us. So
Oh,
that's
cool.
gonna be fun. I probably shouldn't say too much yet, but I think it's gonna be awesome, and I'm looking forward to this. It's a cool way to spend some time and have human interaction.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Nice. Well, thanks for showing up, guys.
Yeah,
Thanks
thank
for
you.
there's some people hanging out on YouTube. That's really awesome. Wow, I've just seen I have, according to this, there's 9.99K subscribers to my channel, which
Awesome.
means we're almost at 10,000. That's awesome.
Heck
So
yeah.
damn, that's weird. That's crazy. All right, cool. Yeah, thanks so much, and we'll do another one soon. I'll put it in the Discord, and we'll be back.
Cool. All right,
All
take it
right.
easy. Y'all be safe. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
Easy.
Thanks, and
See you
take care,
guys.
everyone on YouTube. So long.
Bye.
Take it easy.
Later, man.